days, there's been this question asked, what's the difference between a charm, an amulet, and a talisman? And that would seem to be somewhat like delving into the occult. But we're going to dive a little deeper and see what the reason for that inquiry is. But first of all, in the Middle East, there are very, very ancient superstitions. And amongst those superstitions is one, if you're a shopkeeper and you don't sell something to the first customer that comes into your store, that you'll have bad luck for the rest of the day. And another superstition is that if a pregnant woman has a desire and that desire is not fulfilled, that she can put the evil eye on you. So there's that story of Mulla whose heavily pregnant wife decided that she wanted to buy a new kaftan. So they went out one day very early in the morning to the kaftan store, and they went in where the shopkeeper arrayed all the kaftans on his counter, and Mulla Nasruddin's wife chose a kaftan that she liked, and so some heavy bargaining went on with the shopkeeper. But the shopkeeper was a very hard bargainer, so in the end, the Mulla Nasruddin's wife said, "No, I don't want it." And so she and Mulla Nasruddin went off down the road. Well, the shopkeeper, after they hadn't gone very far, went chasing after them. Stop, please, Mulla, please, Mulla, ask your wife to buy my kaftan." And Mulla said, "Why?" And the shopkeeper said, well, you're the first customers in my shop, and I have to feed my family, and I can't afford to have a bad day. And besides that, if I don't give her what she wants, she could put the evil eye on me." And Mulla Nasruddin looked at the shopkeeper and he said, "Well, you're an intelligent man, and you know that's a lot of superstitious rubbish." Yes, I know," said the shopkeeper, "but just in case, will you please have your wife buy my kaftan?" But then there's rather a complex story about a young man by the name of Aaron, who was born into a pious Jewish family, the father of whom was a miller. The farmers would bring their wheat to him, and with his great grinding wheel, activated by his trusty mule, he ground the wheat into flour for the farmers. But Aaron, at a very early age, found that he had some extraordinary powers, which he kept secret from everyone. But one day when he was minding the mill, a lion came along and ate the mule, who went round and round, pulling and activating the grinding wheel. Now Aaron became very, very angry. So, saying a secret word, he rendered the lion powerless. And after it was powerless, he yoked him to the place where the mule had been, and so the lion became the mule which turned the miller's wheel. Now when Aaron's father came out and saw the lion yoked to the wheel, he became very angry with his son, not because he had this extraordinary power, but he said to his son, "God made this lion as a king of his domain, and you have taken his power, rendered him powerless, and made him a slave. For that you will be punished and sent from this place for 3 years. Now, Aaron could only obey his father, and so he went off, traveling far and wide. But being like his father, a pious Jewish boy, when he came to a strange place, he immediately went to the synagogue. Now, there was an occasion when he was at the synagogue in a certain place, and as was the custom, he was invited by one of those who were in attendance to come back and share the Sabbath meal with them. But when Aaron went to share the Sabbath meal, he found that his host did not eat. Now Aaron asked him, "Why is this that you do not celebrate the Sabbath by eating the Sabbath food?" And the man said, "I have lost my son. He's been missing for a whole year now. I have been unable to find him, and I'm in mourning." Aaron said, "Finish our rituals and come, let's go into the town and see if we can find him." So they set off after the rituals and the meal, and they went from place to place inquiring whether anyone had seen the man's son. And finally they were told that he had been last seen entering a house that was not too far from where they were. So they went to this house, and when the door was opened, it was opened by an old woman, who Aaron immediately recognized as a sorceress. Now, when they inquired whether she had seen the boy, she said, no such boy has been here. But suddenly they heard a mule braying at the back of the house, and Aaron, with his powers, recognized that this was the boy. So he said to the woman, "Quickly, let's go to the back of the house. Maybe someone's trying to steal your mules." So when they went to the back of the house, there were about 12 mules there. But the one who was braying started to kick and leap, and Aaron immediately recognized him as the son who had been bewitched. So he said to the old woman, "This is a very feisty mule. Can I buy it from you?" And she said, "Oh, the price is very high." So Aaron took out from his robe a leather purse, handed it to the old woman, and said, "Here, take whatever amount you want." And of course the old crone's eyes lit up, and she immediately put her hand into the purse. But as she was clasping the gold, she found that the leather purse wrapped itself around her hand, and she couldn't remove her hand. And she got a little desperate. And Aaron said, "You have been captured by the hand of death. Release the spell that you've put on this young man." So frightened, the old woman said her incantation, and the mule disappeared, and in its place was the son of the man. Now the old woman could not release her hand from the leather pouch which seemed to climb up her arm towards the elbow, and she came more desperate and afraid, and Aaron, looking around, realized that the other mules were also bewitched, and so he said, "Release your spell." And so, in fear, she did, and the mules became the young men and women who she had bewitched. They rejoiced and were very happy. But by this time, the hand of death had crept up the woman, and because of her evil deeds, the last thing that was heard of her were her shrieks as she was swallowed up in the pouch. Now everyone came to hear of this, and they thought Aaron was a person of great power. So they invited him to stay, and he stayed for a while. But he had those wandering feet. He had been exiled after all. So he went off wandering further until he came to another place, and again visiting the synagogue. As he was part of the group there, a young man went up to recite the ritual prayers, and with Aaron's powers, he was able to see that this young man had no soul. He was one of the living dead. And this was confirmed because as he was saying the prayers, he omitted to recite the name of God that was contained in them, which is a confirmation, because those who are the living dead cannot speak the name of God. So after the ceremony and service was over, the young Aaron spoke up and said, "What is your story?" And the young man who had said the prayers began to weep, and he said, "My father's best friend invited me to travel far and wide with him, and he promised my father that he would take good care of me. But when we were traveling and came to a certain place where we attended a synagogue service, one of the rabbis started to weep and said, 'I can see that you are going to die.' And my father's friend was desperate, but I promised this boy's father that I would take care of him." And so the rabbi said, "Well, I can help you." So he wrote the name of God on a piece of paper and made an incision in the arm of the boy. When they were on a ship traveling back to their homeland, I fell from the ship's side and entered the water, and my soul departed. But when they hauled me in to the ship, I was still alive. So Aaron said, "Is it not time for you to be released?" And the young man began to weep. So Aaron asked him to put out his arm, and they removed the name that had been placed in the incision, and immediately the young man dropped to their feet He was buried with great ritual, and his father was informed of his death. But then Aaron realized that the 3 years had passed, and it was time to return to his father. When he did so, he was welcomed with a great joy. His father spoke words to him, and it's asked of you, what words do you feel that the father of Aaron said to his son on his return after 3 years in exile, and those tasks that he had undertaken? This story is relevant to our question: what's the difference between a charm, an amulet, and a talisman? With emphasis on the talisman. Putting this question, taking it out of its occult connotations into a deeper place of awareness relative to this story. What is it that arises for you?
I think the father asked or recognised that he learnt to use his powers from the heart and not from anger or something.
Yes.
And so I suppose that the connection with the talisman is the same thing.
Same thing. Because each of us can look at our lives and recognize that we have feared our power. We've feared that which is in us. It's like we've been in exile all of our life, isn't it? Is it 3 years, 20 years, 25 years, 50 years that we've been in exile?
Yeah, I'm around 50.
50, yes. Is this, could it be the talisman that's being spoken of? What did Aaron's father say to him when he returned from those years of exile? What is it that you would say to yourself to acknowledge that power? Allow it to be open, no longer secret and subjugated and perhaps we have to find a key.